Rated M for mature.
Don't let your kids watch it!
Mion's words were stuck in my head. If those 2 dead bodies were the result of the curse, then there should be 2 sacrifices to calm Oyashiro-sama's anger. Oh no. I think I know where this is going. Shion. Shion's going to become obsessed with like, oh no, it's going to be me and Keiichi. We're going to get demoned away. And she's going to try to demon other people away so that she and Keiichi won't have to. And it's going to become a complete mess. The 4 of us snuck into the shrine storage together. It was a simple equation. Did that mean that Keiichi and I were in danger? I got drunk, fell asleep, and decided to stay overnight. Was that because of the alcohol? Or did someone put a drug in my drink? Well, if you drank alcohol, it's because of that. It's not like me to get drunk and spend a night at the hag's house. I wanted to forget about what happened in that eerie storehouse, so I drank too much. But it really was strange for me to get that drunk. Yeah, especially since you're not of age. Maybe. It was a good thing I woke up in the middle of the night. I could have been the one to wake up in a cell. Sometimes it's hard to recognize danger when you avoid it accidentally. A part of me wanted to just laugh at the idea, but another part felt frightened that I was so close to being in Mion's position. If my thinking was correct, I wonder how Keiichi Maebara was doing right now. I didn't see him in any of the cells, but that didn't guarantee his safety. Takano-san and Tomitake-san had been executed. There was a possibility that Keiichi could already be dead. But just like what would happen with Satoshi-kun, it might only happen after a few days. When the sun rose, I was going to pretend to be Mion and head to her school. I was going to check if Keiichi Maebara was safe. If he had already disappeared, the enemy would come after me next. I'd have to be a decoy for myself. But if he was still safe, I'd need to keep my eyes on him. I was sure the enemy would come after that scatterbrain. If I became Mion, Shion would disappear. The enemy would think Shion had already been demoned away, and they'd concentrate on Keiichi. If nothing happened to Keiichi, that would also be fine. It'd prove that nothing would happen to me either. The hag was still sleeping in the wheelchair. I was going to interrogate her. But actually, I wasn't expecting to learn that much. The woman, who was also known as Empress Sonozaki, probably wouldn't say a thing even if her fingers were cut off. Mion, her successor, was the complete opposite. She spoke readily, but didn't know too much about anything. Mion had said she was only a messenger, and that someone else was taking care of problems on the underside. It was possible Mion had grown to be a good liar, and that she tried to deceive me with a straight face. But at the same time, I could see the hag not letting Mion get involved in the underside of the village. If I were her, I wouldn't have used Mion for that either. Unlike me, Mion was a nice person. We'll see about that one. While there were only ones and zeros in the world, she believed that there were numbers with decimal points. In other words, she could never be cruel. If the hag thought the same way as I do, it was very possible. The one who took care of problems on the underside, X, was the one who actually governed the curse of Oyashiro-sama. If the hag had become concerned about something, X would deal with it, either directly or indirectly. Or maybe the hag and X would discuss the details first. But did X really exist? If he did, this place in the village hierarchy was a lot more important than that of the successor, or his place. Unlike Mion, who was too nice, he was discreet, cruel, and cunning. Furthermore, he was extremely close to the hag. Someone who would have a lot of contact with her just before it was time for the curse. Oh, she's gonna think it's the mayor, Kimiyoshi. Because of the way Tomitake-san died, it could be someone who regularly dealt with unusual drugs. He could be a member of a medical institution, or Coach, the director of the Erie Clinic. Erie? In this isolated village, Erie was famous for opening such a beautiful clinic, and for working so hard for the villagers' sake. The villagers liked his mature personality, and really respected him. Yeah, I don't think X exists either. There's nothing scarier than a doctor who's also a murderer. If Erie was the person behind the curse, all the mysterious deaths could be explained. However, there was only a slim chance of Erie being X. The main reason being that the hag wouldn't trust him. He do be bussin' in that outfit, though. Like many of the elderly, the hag doesn't like young people. She's just a real winner, isn't she? I knew she'd never trust him because of his age. Yeah, it can't be Erie, I agree. Furthermore, she had openly criticized his behavior among the relatives once. Although Erie was famous, he was an outsider after all. He wasn't born here. He tried to maintain a good friendship and relationship with the villagers as the director of the clinic, but that was just on the surface. I couldn't even imagine the hag telling him about her worries, or about the village's underside. If she was as suspicious of others as I was, then she'd only gather trustworthy people to deal with that underside. The first people to come to my mind were the leaders of the three families. Leaving Rika-chama out, the head of the Kimiyoshi family, was a strong possibility. He was the only one who could advise Empress Sonozaki. They were of a similar age, and everyone knew that they were very close outside the family councils. Furthermore, as the mayor, he often went out to the Sonozaki house just before Watanagashi to discuss festival preparations. I could easily picture them talking privately. The one who executed the curse of Oyashiro-sama. The one who murdered Takano-san and Toмотake-san. The mastermind behind the series of mysterious deaths that had been going on for the past 5 years. Was he coming after me? Did he get to Satoshi-kun? When I thought about Satoshi-kun, I felt elevated. There's no way it's the mayor. Mayor's too much of a himbo. Yeah, it's definitely not Rika either. Because Rika, well, I guess her disembowelment may not be the direct result of the curse. It might just be someone who's really messed up. But it doesn't make sense for it really to be Rika at all. For one, she's like 10. And also, like, Rika knows that her death is basically predetermined. So, it's weird. I was fearful of possibly being the year's victim until just a moment ago. I was scared that X was after me. But when I thought about it, I realized, whoever it was, this person had gotten Satoshi-kun. I looked so hard, but I couldn't find him. I'd almost forgotten about this enemy. For better or for worse, he was going to appear before me again. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find that enemy. But now he was trying to find me. That was it. I wasn't only being chased, I was chasing too. When I realized all this, I was no longer afraid of dying to the 5th year's curse. It had become a game. I wasn't only being threatened, I was threatening too. Now it was the time to settle the score for Satoshi-kun. Now was the time to awaken passions that had grown weak over the past year. I could feel righteous indignation and courage flare up within me. The only emotion that can defeat fear is anger. When my anger completely overtook my fear, I felt as though I were reborn. That's true. Disembowelment is exactly how the festival goes, using fluff instead of organs, so it is definitely related. That's a good point, Shirley. Honestly, Chapter 2 is starting to make a lot more sense for me. Not quite everything. There's still some stuff at the end that needs some clearing up, but Chapter 2 makes a lot of sense. Chapter 3 makes a decent amount of sense now, except the ending, which is nuts. I honestly, guys, I think the single biggest question mark for me right now is Chapter 1. Like, I cannot put my finger on what the heck actually went down in Chapter 1. And because it doesn't really seem at all related to this, and it seems so different. With just like, because like Chapter 2, you had Shion going nuts. Chapter 3, you had all of the stuff with Satoko and her uncle. Chapter 4 was a pretty straightforward one. And then here we got more of the Chapter 2 stuff. But Chapter 1 was basically Keiichi becoming... Keiichi didn't even know about the curse, really, until the festival. Or until after the festival, when Uisi kind of told him about it. And he was like, my friends kept this from me. And then they were like, oh, he knows about it now, and we're becoming crazy. But that doesn't really make sense now with what we know now. So, like, what was up with what happened in Chapter 1? That's, Maybe that's what Rena's story is about? Probably. I kicked her wheelchair rather violently, but that didn't wake her up either. I think you killed her with the stun gun. You might want to check for a pulse. I grabbed her hair and pulled her head up, but even then the hag still stayed silent with a straight face. Then I noticed something. I looked for an appropriate torture device. They were all large scale, none of them being particularly handy. That's when I saw a cigarette lighter on a cushion in the tatami room. One of the relatives must have left it there. Today, smoking is going to save lives. I lit the lighter. A huge flame appeared. I turned the lighter off and went back to the hag with it. I lit it in front of her eyes.
ですから寝たふりをやめてくださ
I
い。
think she's dead. There was still no response. I put the flame right under her nose without hesitation. The tip of the flame touched the tip of her nose. The flame must have burnt her nose hair. It smelled terrible. I was already certain, but I continued anyway. I brought the flame closer to her eye. Her eyelid didn't move one bit. The flame burned her eyelashes, making it smell awful again. I turned the lighter off and then felt her throat and wrist. I didn't feel any warmth. I didn't feel a pulse either.
こいつスタンガンで
Yep.
死んだ。
She's gonna be real mad about that. There was no way she could pretend to be asleep while being burned. Even if she could endure the pain, anyone would reflexively move their eyelids if a flame came close to their eyes. But she didn't. I turned the sink water on and aimed the end of the hose at the hag's face. The water pressure wasn't too high, but by squeezing the tip of the hose, I could make it squirt out. The water hit the hag in the face, but there was still no reaction. Shit. You've got to be kidding me. She's dead. The one who was at the center of everything is dead now. I knew she wouldn't talk, but I didn't expect her to end up dead. I'd never even thought of killing her. I walked around the room restlessly. I didn't feel guilty, but instead felt frustrated with what I'd done. Come on, I need to calm down. What do I need to be afraid of? Calm down. And stay cool. Calm down. Stay cool. I could feel my brain starting to calm down, and my emotions cooling down with it. She was my true enemy. It was just that I killed her before confronting her about it. Sooner or later, I would have killed her anyway. She wouldn't have said anything in the first place, so there wasn't really a reason why I should have let her live. I didn't realize that until now, but that's why I got frustrated. My revenge for Satoshi-kun started with the unexpected death of my grandmother. It was such a strange feeling, like I was wearing sopping wet clothes. I replaced that feeling with anger. I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't forgive the hag for abusing the Hojo family, including Satoshi-kun, for so many years. She cornered him psychologically as well as physically. She didn't deserve an easy death from a stun gun. I thought that's how she was gonna go. I thought she would be like, I was gonna make her suffer. I picked up a whip that was hanging on the wall. Oof. That's Shion's fault. She's old. She's old! The whip was designed to make sure a person on the receiving end got seriously injured. Oh, is it like a scourge? I swung it up and then down. The sound reminded me of when I was a child, hitting things with a jump rope I pretended was a whip. But unlike then, I'd make a purple mark on the hag's face, and reddish-black blood started oozing out. I swung it up and down again. This time the whip hit her in the head. Her hair flew in the air. I saw a bunch of her hair on the tip of the whip. At the end of the bunch of hair, there was a piece of her skin. It seemed the whip had ripped part of her scalp off. Yeah, that's a scourge for sure. I continued to hit her with the whip. I didn't even bother removing the hair beforehand. Actually, that might be a cat of nine tails. The tip of the whip was divided into many points, with each point having a fish hook at the end. That's a cat of nine tails. There you go. Those hooks, added with the speed of the whip, not only scratched the victim, but tore their skin as well. Yikes. The hag's hair was all messed up and her face was getting bloody. Why do you need this many torture devices? She had started to look like a real demon. I stopped the whipping. Not because my arm was tired, but because I couldn't stand the feeling of her hair off the tip touching me every time I swung the whip. I threw the whip at the hag. Breathing heavily, I realized I was covered in her hair. It almost felt like thousands of maggots crawling all over me. I brushed it off violently. Well, there's hating your grandma, and then there's hating your grandma. I put my hands on my knees and exhaled roughly. It was then that I noticed it. I perked up and turned around. There it is. The person who had been watching me since I snuck into the shrine storage. I sensed this person sitting on the tatami room. It enjoyed watching me torture my grandmother. An overwhelming emotion started to swallow me up. I tried desperately not to feel it.
いつからそこにいたんだか。
Oh, here we go. I think we're getting into some actual demon stuff right now.
言ってくれればよかったのに。
it was just there. Just like Satoshi-kun, it was just there. It was extremely uncomfortable to have it just be there.
そっか。レナが言ってたもんね。
I legit do think there is a demon involved. Like, at the heart of all of this. I don't know if it's responsible for everything, but right now that's kind of the... Well, even though... No, that doesn't even make much sense. Because only certain people are able to hear that extra footstep. So I'm not sure if that does explain the people going crazy thing.
あんたお社様ってのは
I smiled boldly. And yet, I could feel my body shivering.
冗談じゃない。あんたがお社様で、たたりは本当にお社様のたたりってわけなの。バーカ！誰が信じるかよ。へ？
It was just my imagination. It couldn't be the curse of Oyashiro-sama. The curse couldn't be real. Everything was done by humans. They made everything look like a curse.
まあ、あんたが見たいってんなら勝手だけどさ。私は見物料を取るつもりもない。でも、私の邪魔をしようってんなら、あんただって容赦しないよ。
No matter what I said, nothing happened. It was like trying to communicate with an insect. I felt like I was staring at a spider in the middle of its web, and the spider was staring back. I turned to the hag in the wheelchair. I couldn't leave her body here forever. If I don't need to make her death known, then it should be quick, and it's best if a body doesn't exist. Not even in this secret underground torture room. Phew. I exhaled to try to calm myself down. Oh, I remember now. When I was a little girl. Kasai used to love making me feel scared. He often told me scary stories about various horrible things. I recall this story about the secret torture room of the Sonozaki family. According to the story, there was a well in the torture room for dumping bodies in. There was a pile of tortured corpses at the bottom of the well, and resentful moans could be heard echoing from here. And about halfway down the well, there was a different tunnel, which was a secret passage leading into the distant mountains. That bit was from Mion's telling of the story. It was probably an amalgamation of tellings from different relatives. The room was supposed to be a huge secret, but everyone got loose lips at the chance to have fun scaring the young successor.
ミオン、昔親戚の誰かが言ってたじゃん。この地下拷問室のどこかに隠し井戸があって、外へ出られる秘密の通路があ
I
る。
probably wouldn't tell her where it is. Especially since Mion definitely just heard her whipping Onibaba.
さっきの音は聞こえてなかった？鬼ババを無知で叩く音。
Mion didn't reply, but I saw her bite her lip.
大丈夫。あんたは叩かない。でもね、あんたが不愉快だと、鬼ババ
Oh!
をもっと叩くかもしれない。
Okay, that's interesting, Shion. So you're not physically torturing your sister, but you're bluffing. Interesting.
今度は無知なんかじゃなくて。そこの奥、暗がりにも牢屋があるでしょ。
Looks like Mion actually does care about her grandma.
その中。
So she's not all bad. Mion pointed weakly. I walked down there to where her finger indicated. A light bulb lit up the cell. It was a lot smaller than the one Mion was in. It was very shallow, and I didn't even need to open the door to see how tiny it was. Of course, there's no well in there. I became angry, assuming that she lied to me. But after questioning it, I didn't actually think she would at this point. One thing that's worrying me, though. So, Shirley, you said that you've heard this chapter is intense. Now, we did have the fingernail scene, which was pretty intense. But if this is going the same route that Chapter 2 did, this means Shion is going to kill Rika and Satoko in the torture room. And considering that that happened off-screen in Chapter 2, that might be happening on-screen in this chapter. And honestly, I can see Shion doing that to both of them, because she hates Satoko, and Rika, she can easily say, like, she's involved, because she's one of the free families, and also Rika protected Satoko, so... Oh boy! I opened the door and walked in. I noticed something immediately. Oh. The pit of no return. There was an opening right in the middle of the cell. The opening was naturally disguised. The way the rocks and the shadows were positioned perfectly hid the well. The tip of a rock inside a cell concealed the entrance. Unless you went in, you'd never notice. But it was such a shallow cell that nobody would even think of going in. Besides, the bars allow you to see the inside well enough. The cell is not even a few meters deep, so it would only take a glance to see everything. Nobody would think of unlocking the door and walking in. But walking in was the only way anyone could find the well. Furthermore, there were many cells in this huge cave. Who'd think that one of them was hiding a secret well? The inside of the well was dark. I couldn't see anything. But every little noise I made produced echoes. I could tell this was a very deep well. I brought a flashlight from the torture room and shone it down the well. It almost looked like a vertical tunnel. Obviously a man-made one at that. There were wedges on the wall like a ladder, and they looked as if they were inviting me to descend. It's kind of ironic that the secret escape route from an underground torture room ended up being a well that takes you even further down. You had no way of knowing whether it would take you to freedom or to hell. Furthermore, there were the tortured bodies of past victims at the bottom. Who would be able to go down this well without hesitation? The police. Nobody in their right mind would go down this well to look for a secret tunnel, hearing the voices of the dead all the time.
ミオンはあの井戸降りたことあるの？降りたくもない。それに関しては著しく同感。
That's gonna be how she escapes at the end.
この拷問室の犠牲者たちが放り込まれた井戸になんか好き好んで降りたくはないもんね。
I went back to the torture room and then returned to the cave, pushing the wheelchair containing the hag. Mion screamed.
シオン、バッチャを落とすけ？落とすんじゃないよ。捨てるんだよ。もう死んでるしね。さっきの拷問で死んだんじゃないよ。
Yeah, she didn't torture her to death.
多分鬼ババはスタンガンで死んだんだよ。心臓麻痺とかで。放置してもいいけど、虫が湧くと嫌でしょ？ひどい。なんなら死後の鬼ババの世話もする？湧いてくるウジを箸でつまんで捨てるとかやってみる？
Yuck. Yuck. Mion covered her ears and shook her head. Everything I said seemed to bother Mion. Her own life wasn't guaranteed at this point.
シオン、
Should be...
どうして？
I mean, to be fair, she didn't mean to kill her, but she absolutely was going to kill her anyway, so I'm not... Honestly, I don't want to defend Shion, but of all the characters that Shion could have killed, her killing her grandma is legitimately one of the more understandable ones. So...
さ
I
て。
feel like I'm actually more mad at Shion for beating up the 10-year-old abuse victim than I am for her killing her grandma.
どうしてだと思います？
Nobody said anything for a while, but the silence was soon broken.
サトシ。敵討ちってこと？敵討ちになったかもわからん。いきなり後ろからバチンだったから。何が何やらわかんないうちにご臨終だったろうし。
Maybe she suffered the ideal death.
ねえミオン、今こうして思い返すと、私はやっぱりばあさんを殺すだけの理由があったよう
I
な
don't think you really had to think about it that much. Your grandma treated you horribly.
なぜかわかる？単にサトシ君を殺した張本人だからってだけじゃないよ。それは嘘をついたから。
Oh, that's not what I was gonna say. I slapped the hag's head.
あんたも言ったよね。私が爪を剥がせば全て許すって。だから私は爪を剥がしたんだよ。3枚も。それでけじめがついたってことになったんだよね。でも約束は守られなかった。
I don't think she did. She didn't do it this time.
サトシ君はやっぱり消されてしまった。
I don't think she did.
どうして？どういうことなの？
I continued to slap the hag's head. Her blood was all over my hand by then, and it felt gross. I tried to wipe it off on her clothes, but then her hair got on my hand. I ran to the sink in the torture room and washed my hands with a brush. When I was done, I went back to Mion's cell.
あの時、サトシ君が
Sorry for interrupting my monologue.
あんたが来て言ったよね。サトシ君と私の関係はけじめがもうついてたって。そしてこうも言ったよね。サトシ君の失踪の理由は園崎本家は何も知らないと。うん。嘘だ。
Lied! 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 Lied. Lied. My shouts echoed throughout the cave. I was breathing heavily. It felt like I used up all of the air in my lungs.
あんたが何も知らないのは本当だと思う。あんた自身、ばあさんに真の意味で信頼を得ていたかは怪しいからね。でも、ばあさんが本当に私のけじめでサトシ君を許したかはわからないよ。アマちゃんのあんたに本当のところを打ち明けるわけもない。
The hag didn't keep her promise. She said she'd forgive everyone, but she lied. Lied, not as powerful as Rena. I mean, Rena's just had the benefit of being the first one to go crazy, so she made a big impact. Also, though, Rena in Chapter 1 scared me more than anything else in the game thus far. The scene of Rena trying to break into our house is the most terrifying moment in the game. For me, at least. She didn't forgive. She didn't forgive Satoshi-kun!
嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき、嘘つき。 かな、返してサトシ君。
You knew him for 2 weeks!
返してよサトシ君、返して返して返して返して。
I kicked the hag's leg repeatedly. Each time I kicked, the wheelchair made a squeaky noise. I ran out of breath and kneeled down. Mion was still covering her ears and was now shaking. There were tears in her eyes.
怖がらせちゃったね。ごめんごめん。ミオンがミオンの言うように何も知らなかったなら安心して。でももしミオンも嘘をついていたなら仕方ない。その時はどういう目に遭わされても仕方ない。
Okay, another weird one. A side symptom of going insane seems to be you absolutely hate liars. Everybody who has gone crazy has gone absolutely nuts when they realize or assume somebody's been lying to them. Shion's doing it now. Rena did it. Keiichi did it when he was going crazy. Satoko did it at the end of Chapter 3 when she thought that we were lying about not killing Rika, even though we didn't kill Rika. So, is that just a coincidence? Does hating liars beget craziness, or does craziness beget hating liars? Or is it a vicious cycle?
仕方ないよね。
No, I don't, Shion. Crazy! Yeah, that's how Shion went full crazy. You never go full crazy. New tips unlocked! Are these tips that Shion is going to take advantage of, or maybe not? Steen of Payback took the first step towards revenge. That was the first step?! Okay. I wasn't planning to kill the hag so quickly. I was going to kill her anyway, but it was too soon. People would normally assume that the Sonozaki family operates as a hierarchy, but that's not true. It's actually more like a system of government. Several ministries stem from the main family, and each forms a hierarchy of its own. These ministries don't communicate with one another. The people who belong to a given ministry don't know what other ministries are doing. That way, the Sonozaki family's dealings are kept perfectly secret. Of course, the most important people in the family govern several ministries. They know, of course, about their own ministries, and they know a little bit about the ministries their relatives run, but none of them know everything. There are ministries that work in the open, there are ministries that work unseen, and there are some smaller ones that Oreo runs herself. Mion seems to know about most of them, but she doesn't necessarily know them all. In fact, she didn't know about the curse. Considering that, the fact that the hag died before I could interrogate her is a huge loss. I don't think she necessarily would have told you anyway. She probably would have been like, "You're the worst!" Ah! And then just snap her own neck. Liars lead to mistrust. Mistrust is a hand-in-hand with crazy. Yeah, maybe. The head of the Kimiyoshi family was the one who I called the main house most often after the 5th year's curse. Is that so? Sorry. Shion just ate breakfast. My father called the second most. My parents were still high in the hierarchy, but the stir caused by my mother's disownment still hung over us, so we got treated as outcasts. So the fact that my father received so many calls proved how much the hag valued us despite the distance at which we were kept, demonstrating her own two-faced respect for both sides of the coin. My father seems to be in charge of the intelligence bureau. He reported police information, gossip, and rumors going around in the Yakuza business to the hag. He silences, stirs, and distorts that information at her request. By the way, my servant Kasai is an old friend of my father's. That must be why Kasai knows many things. But I don't know if my father is involved in the curse's execution. My assumption is that although he gathered information on the police investigation about the case, he wasn't involved in the execution itself. The fact that my father and the hag have this close connection isn't widely known. People know that she uses his information network, but they don't look very far beyond that. In the same way, it's possible that a curse execution team exists under the hag's direct control. People just aren't aware of it. Well, that's very interesting. Let's continue.